Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome all of you back to Ohio Exopolitics. I'm your host, Mark Snyder, and this has been a while since I've done the show just straight through Blog Talk, not gone through Revolution Radio. Don't have any guest plans. All my pets are running wild around the outside. Who knows what's going to happen in the next hour? I took a little time off and thought I would just jump in to talk a little bit about the Meyer case. I haven't been doing shows quite like this in a little while. It's interesting how things evolve and change over time in different ways. I'm going to read a little bit just from the Way to Live book here in the beginning of the show. It says, the human being must show and prove himself to be the truest, best, and most sincere friend to himself or herself. And when he or she wants just as much pleasantness, deference, and respect from him or herself as he wishes for him or herself from the sight of strangers. You know, one of the most interesting focuses of this book, The Way to Live, is fulfilling your duty to yourself, being a friend to yourself, which is different. It's a totally different approach to things. It says here, then it is his or her absolute duty to be just as strict with him or herself in every conceivable regard as with others. However, the rule with human beings is a different one. The human being forgives him or herself practically everything and anything, and he or she exercises forbearance with him or herself whenever possible. He/she even forgives him or herself murder and manslaughter, and for every oh so miserable deed of his or hers. He or she always invents and finds an excuse, while he or she forgives the human being next to him or her and all others absolutely nothing, and always demands only the hardest punishment for them, whereby often torture and death cannot be hard enough. You notice it said there that we forgive ourselves of murder and manslaughter, and there's this interesting verse in the Might of Thoughts that says, when tangled ideas confuse the thoughts and cause them to go from one extreme to another and create a misdirection of the thoughts, which triggers emotions, which can often lead to murder and manslaughter. So that is such an interesting passage because it outlines this whole series of cause and effect steps towards making a very bad life decision, like murder or manslaughter. And it's hard to believe how close we can be to those kinds of horrific, bad decisions sometimes. So we have to be in a constant state of introspection. And one of the most important things about introspection is that over time, we build up this long-term potentiation. And this is the process of strengthening your synapses in your brain. And what we're doing here is we're fighting a battle in many respects with the subconscious mind, because the subconscious mind has learned many bad habits, both from society, from the experiences of our parents, and the brainwashing of television and media. So old habits are hard to break. We create these thought processes that are habitual, and we have a more or less fixed way of thinking. So we have to kind of nurture along these new, better thoughts. So we want to encourage the growth and development of new synapses, which are thinking in a neutral, positive way. So, and as soon as, for us to learn something new, the electrical signal has to jump across this gap in the brain called the synapse. And then it can continue its journey. And this gap is really tiny. However, the first time the signal crosses that barrier requires the most amount of effort. So what I'm saying is you're trying to build a whole series of synapses in your brain, which is your long-term potentiation, your long-term perspective, your long-term behavior. So every day, you wake up and you tell yourself, I'm confident, I'm optimistic, I'm relaxed, I'm cheerful, I'm enthusiastic, I'm the master of my own destiny, I'm the forger of my own fortune, I create my own good luck. I do not allow my thoughts to drift, I steer my thoughts like a captain steers his ship. I strengthen my thoughts, I nurture my thoughts. And this is an example of this building these synapses in your brain. And it's widely accepted that the synapse plays a role in the formation of memory. So can commit certain of this Meyer material to your memory, and it will help you very much. As it says in Figure Bulletin 35, the human learns through constant repetition, respectively. Constant drops make a hole in the stone. So this is part of the spiritual teachings in the Meyer case is this repetition, because we have to rebuild the synapses in our conscious mind as well as kind of write over the old programs that are stored in the subconscious. So if you apply knowledge in repetition, this leads to practical experience. And that's what we're looking for, proficiency. So repeated self-lived experience and self-tested experience leads to wisdom. So this is what we're looking for. In the Contact Report 243, it says, only through constant repetition of a thing, the human being is able to comprehend and retain it in his memory, what is learned. And that's when you start to get to where you can act on these things. So you get to the point where you're not nurturing negative thinking. I think a lot about how Billy, when he was a very, very young boy, he would get these contacts from Svoth that were telepathic at first, and then Billy would go out somewhere near his home there in Blue Lock, Switzerland, and this silvery pear-shaped craft would land, and Svoth would pick him up and start to teach him, which is really ironic because Billy had been Svoth's teacher in a prior lifetime. So Svoth knew, I don't think at the early stage of the early contacts, he knew that Billy's former personalities included this big shot teacher, the player on have called Nocodamian. But I think at that time, Svoth knew that he had been Enoch, the people that today we call Enoch, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Emmanuel, and Muhammad. So he knew about Billy's mission, Svoth did, and they have the technology to identify Billy's spirit form as being extraterrestrial and as being the same spirit form that they had this prophet who had been teaching on Earth. And so Svoth had the chance to return the favor. What the whole thing was here is that the material consciousness of Edward Albert Meyer is just like the material consciousness we get in every time we have a new lifetime. It has to be educated. Now, stored in the subconscious are all of this wisdom, the essence of these consciousness forms that I've been talking about. And it's these essences that we don't call them directly, but the spirit form will impulse us. As Samyasi told Billy later, she said, every human has a spirit form. It does not sleep, it does not die. And it will tell you if your thinking is right or wrong if you've learned to pay attention to it. So your spirit form will impulse you when you're having negative thoughts. And it will tell you if your thoughts are negative. For example, as long as a human being nurtures unclean, pessimistic, wrong, sick, bad, and negative thoughts, his or her feelings, which in turn correspondingly form the psyche, from which one's life and body are influenced. So your bad thoughts produce bad feelings, and that affects your body. One of the most important things to remember is patience and contentment. Because if you have impatience and lack of contentment, this can lead to hate and anger. And when we are pessimistic, we are tending to see the worst part of things. So there's an article about impatience and not being content. And let me read just a little bit of this, and then we'll get back to the Way to Live book. It says, impatience and uncontentment are two of the great enemies of the human being, which prevent and destroy both his or her inner peace and his or her freedom and harmony. If the building up of these values is prevented, or they are destroyed, then also the purely thought, feeling-based love, as well as the goodness and the dignity, are affected by it. That is to say, prevented and or destroyed. If these high values do not exist purely in a spiritual, fine feeling-based form, rather only in a thought feeling-based form or structure, then they are irrevocably become subject to prevention or destruction. And it must be understood from this that love, peace, freedom, harmony, as well as goodness and dignity are of effective correctness and of lasting, indestructible value only when they come forth from the spiritual gemut, in a spiritual, fine, feeling-based form according to the creational natural laws. So the way I kind of see this in my, in my humility, I have to, this information is so profound. Let me just say that. We all aspire to understand it. I think we learn things. For example, we learn things from the spiritual teachings. They go into the conscious mind, and when we repeat them, we build a synapse structure in the conscious mind, which is called our long-term potentiation. But we also start to affect the subconscious, and we start to kind of write over these old patterns of thinking. So there's a two-stage kind of battle here. There's the conscious mind, and then there's the subconscious mind. And I think we get to the subconscious mind through repetition. Why do I say that? Well, for example, a musician that learns, a great pianist learns a piece of music. Well, when he can just play, he's performing. That's applied knowledge. He has to learn it. That goes into the subconscious. The conscious mind does not have the power to play like that. I mean, you would have to literally think about every note you were going to play next, where they are stored as patterns in the subconscious. And once they get stored as patterns in the subconscious, you can pull out these chord forms and these melodic forms. They come instinctually from the subconscious automatically. So that's kind of the way the spiritual teaching has to go. We have to learn it in our conscious mind. We have to build up a synaptic framework in the conscious mind. And then we have to start to build a subconscious structure. And a lot of times when you are triggered, what's happening is a subconscious whole group of bad subconscious thoughts are, you're just like throwing up or something. And they come out of the subconscious. And then pretty soon you got a mess everywhere and you're embarrassed. And you've got to try to clean up the mess. So better to build a conscious structure and a subconscious one. So there's nothing for you to throw up, is what I'm saying. And that's a horrible analogy in a way, but that's what happens. If we nurture negative thoughts, they build up not only in the conscious mind, but in the subconscious. Let me read a little bit from the My Thoughts here. The origin of thoughts thereby forms from various factors which arise both from ideas and views as well as from wishes and desires. And what it says here, it is necessary to control the very origin of our thoughts. If we have good, clean, neutral, positive thoughts, then our psyche will not be harmed. The psyche can be degenerated in one form or another from a positive or a negative imbalance. Remember, we're always trying to be neutral, positive. The goal is to maintain a balanced harmony in the psyche. Remember, the psyche controls the thoughts and feelings of the material consciousness. To brighten up our psyche, we must have thoughts that are affirming to life. To affirm means to offer emotional support or encouragement. So that's what we're trying to do here. Remember the book, The Psyche. What a good book. What a difficult book in some way. So the psyche is the factor in which the state of a negative or a positive mood, respectively, the atmosphere of the inner attitude, is produced from the state of the psyche. So the psyche, again, controls the thoughts and the feelings of the material consciousness. The good mood controls the thoughts and the feeling of the spiritual consciousness. Very important to remember also, thoughts are so powerful. Your thoughts create the circumstances in your life. Your thoughts also affect your appearance. Thoughts can make you have more wrinkles. So don't become enslaved to negative thoughts. Don't become imprisoned to your own negative thinking. Learn to think of peace, love, joy, and harmony. I have to repeat constantly in order to keep my thoughts on the path. Otherwise, you can become what's called a sartang, out of control of the good human nature. So, and it's the thoughts which determine your physical well-being. So the might of the thoughts, anxiety and fear kill thousands of people all the time. Anxious thoughts can be very demoralizing. Wrong thoughts, Billy says in the later part of the book that as a rule, suffering is an effect of wrong thinking. So wrong thinking shakes the entire nervous system, whereas the neutral, positive, equalized, healthy thoughts help you build up a resistance. So it's really interesting if you get a cold or you get sick, think back over the week or whatever and think, did you have thoughts where you felt weak? I mean, were you thinking in a weak way? Were you thinking that you were vulnerable? Were you thinking in a negative way? A lot of times the misuse of thoughts can have self-creative suffering, and you can imprint on your own face some of your self-created suffering. So again, and don't allow your thoughts to drift, as I said, from there, because you can dredge up garbage from your subconscious from years ago. Only a conscious or an unconscious purposefulness is able to bring your thoughts to fruition. So you start to develop a zeal. Goal is not the term Billy likes to use. He likes to say things like life determination. The might of thoughts is only effective when there is a intention, a setting of the zeal. We don't have a good enough word in the English. Goal he doesn't like, but that's probably, we don't even, goal is not good enough, but it's the only concept we have as English thinkers. So the conscious mind is your awareness. It's sometimes said we have three minds: the conscious, the subconscious, the unconscious. The conscious mind is your objective thinking. Now, your conscious mind doesn't really have much of a memory. You really hold on to one thought at a time. So your conscious mind identifies information, compares information, does analysis, and finally, the conscious mind makes a decision. But we have this subconscious mind, also called the preconscious mind, which has information in it. And it is possible that some of what might be perceived to be unconscious becomes subconscious, and then the conscious. For example, you can have thoughts, long forgotten thoughts from your childhood memory, which slowly drift to the surface. And then suddenly you're remembering these thoughts. And your unconscious mind consists of primitive instinctual wishes as well. Some of the information we cannot even access. So the contents of the unconscious, according to Freud, sometimes are unpleasant, unacceptable, pain, anxiety. So you can think of the unconscious mind as like an iceberg. Everything above the water represents your conscious awareness, but below the water, the gigantic iceberg is your unconscious. So what I'm saying is, as you're developing this habit through repetition of telling yourself you're confident, you're optimistic, you're relaxed, you're cheerful, you're enthusiastic, you endure, you persevere, you persist, that you're satisfied, that you have harmony, that you're the master of your own destiny, the forger of your own fortune, the creator of your own good luck, that you have good thoughts, good feelings, good habits, and good circumstances. As you're doing this, you're creating habits, the habit of thinking in a positive way. And even if it's by rote and repetition, it actually starts to become part of your unconscious behavior. So in other words, instead of going back, when you get busy and your conscious mind is working on something, your subconscious can go back into a kind of negativity. Before you realize it, you're going back to your bad thinking process. But if you, through repetition, inculcate yourself with this information, that it becomes habitual to think in a neutral positive form. So, for example, one of the things I've emphasized on the show lately is the human being must never think needy thoughts, because thoughts live as do words. In other words, if you think needy, you're going to create all this need, compulsive need in your life. That's probably what the addict does. But you want to have intention, setting of a zeal. And you can do that both consciously and unconsciously. What's interesting is, as this information penetrates your subconscious, I think you do start to set goals you do sometimes unconsciously set goals, which is a wild idea, because, see, you have wants, and your wants are starting to become neutral positive rather than negative wants or wants that are unhealthy. So, because a thought can in fact only be intelligently filled and brought to fruition when there is a definite intention. So intention means to have a course of action, a purpose, an objective, a plan. The German word, I think, is vorhaben, means to intend, to mean, to purpose, to plan, to contemplate. So, let me get back to the way to live. I wanted to make sure we hit this book a little bit because I'm not covering this book enough. One's own missteps, whether serious or not serious, are often thought of by the human being as only trivial peccadillos, which are excusable at all times. However, the same missteps with others, the fallible ones, are severely and harshly blamed. But once one acknowledges one's own slip-ups and missteps, then one does not attribute the blame to that of himself or herself, rather to some kind of failed circumstances and adverse influences, irresistible drives into the destiny which is, so unable to be influenced. But in fact, it is always and in every case very much simpler and more comfortable to reject the blame oneself, but at the same time to pillory the aberrations of the human being next to oneself as intolerably as possible, and to pull them through all heights and depths of disparagement. So what the Might of Thoughts, I think, is saying here is, don't, if you see some flaws in a colleague or a family member, just put your attention on your own flaws. Do not try to correct the flaws of others. That's very interesting. It's not good to do that, either in regard to the fairness and the respect of the next one, or for one's own well-being and for the futuring of one's fulfillment of duty to oneself and one's fulfillment of one's own duty. One of the duties to yourself is, and you'll learn this, I think, is studying this material, because it really gives you real answers to your practical day-to-day problems. One fulfillment of one's own duty, which are defined thus: the fulfillment of one's own duty is that duty which the human being ought to observe and maintain in regard to the fulfillment of the duties which are worthy of the human being, and which one is to impose upon oneself, and to fulfill self-initiative. Said with simpler words, one's own duty means the task of the human being to fulfill his or her duty to himself or herself through his or her own initiative, which present to the human being, among other things, as, for example, respect, honor, honesty, good and correct actions, uprightness, openness, decent forms of language and expression, honor and dignity, peace, truthfulness, good and correct deeds, truthfulness and true humanity, esteem and high regard, and so on and so forth, both in regard to oneself as well as in regard to others, whereby all life forms and the whole environment as well as the whole universal existence of all things generally are included. Thus, nothing exists in the whole universe that would not be connected with the fulfilling of one's duty to oneself. Now, don't ask me to explain that to you. I'm going to have to work on that one for a while. Everything in the whole universe is related or connected to fulfilling of the duty. Your duty to yourself, that's pretty wild. That's pretty amazing. Not sure I have all the answers, but that's okay. I mean, we have a lot of things that we don't have all the answers for. I was trying to think about just a short little clip that I might play for you, just a few seconds here. There's so much going on in the world today in terms of the New World Order, the potential of a civil war coming on top of us before we even know what's going on. And that's one of the things that the Meyer information has talked about, is this potential civil war. And it just, in some ways, it pains me to talk about this, but I'll just take a few minutes because there's a lot of ramblings about things. And I wanted to touch on this because they're after Bush, they're after Jerome Corsi. I mean, they're not after Bush. They've been having all these shows about H.W. Bush and the fact that he's passed away, and I think they're brainwashing us with this. This is a subconscious attack that they're doing again. We have Jerome Corsi, who's getting attacked by Mueller. There's so much going on, so much disruption in our government. And the Meyer prophecies, the Henoch prophecies, has talked about the coming potential civil war. And then I'll get back to the spiritual teachings. So bear with me. I just want to cover this for a few minutes.
Alex, the thing is this. We've been penetrated. We've been infiltrated. How high up it goes is anyone's guess. We know that the president's middle name is not Jesus. We know that the military has been told to stand down. We know the police have been told to stand down. We know that there's only one sacred religion in the United States of America, and it isn't the founding religion. It's the invasive religion. And the fact of the matter is, the FBI director who warned us 6 weeks ago, this was just before Hussein's conference, counterterrorism conference in Washington, where he invited Muslim groups. He disinvited the head of the FBI who said that ISIS is in 49 out of the 50 states. Why would he do that to the head of the FBI who warned us? There's only one answer. Someone in that team in the White House is playing for the other side. They're not on our side. Now, of course, the good news here, Alex, is when I saw this terrible event last night, the good news is the beefy Texas cops killed the scum. They wiped the scum off the planet and sent them to heaven where they can go rape babies. I guess that's their reward. They get to rape 72 babies in the next world. What a religion. Isn't that great? Kill someone on this planet so you can rape 72 infants in the next world. Doesn't CNN find that obscene and pornographic and sickening? What can I say to you that you don't already know, Alex? We know we're at war. They've been at war with us for 1,000 years. The president has been at war with America for the time he, left Colombia and discovered his Afro roots. When he was a kid, he didn't identify with his radical side. Read his own autobiography. Then he found out that by acting like a black radical, everyone kissed his feet. And look where he is today, so why should he stop now? He wasn't a radicalized young man, but he found out that the white people fell on their feet the minute he acted out the Black Panther game. Look where he is now. Why should he stop now? He has that scum, Al Sharpton, in the White House 50 times and no one says a word. The anti-police scum, Alex. I get apoplectic over this. Can you imagine if a right...
Well, that clip was from a couple of years ago, where Michael Savage was talking to Alex Jones, and some of this stuff does make you apoplectic, as he said, or some of the stuff. Our government, our United States, is now in control. There is a foreign power that's in control of our government that controls the media. And the mainstream media is putting out false information 24/7 now, continually. So, and Billy has said that eventually the United States will break into 5 different territories and that we will have 2 civil wars. Now, I hope Billy's wrong. I hope that the people around the country and around the world that are starting to study the spiritual teachings, that this can start having an impact on our thinking. So that's what's going to save us. That's what's going to correct things. Ultimately, is right thinking, and that's a challenge. It's not. It takes a lot of dedication to continue to think in a healthy way. Let me take us back to one of the most healthy thoughts that you can have is regarding to the love of creation. You know, our universe is 46 trillion years old. It was created roughly 46 trillion years ago. It's much older than our scientists realize because we can only look at matter. But the universe, when our universe was created, there was also a parallel universe called the Tao universe created. So there's these two parallel universes now, the Tao and the Dern universe. They're both 46 trillion years old, and they're both in their expansion phase. Particularly, our universe is expanding, and there are new spirit forms coming in. There are planets being created. There are solar systems. There are galaxies being created, and the intelligence behind our universe is not what we've been taught by our religions. It's not God in the sense of a perfect father figure or mother figure that is all-knowing, omniscient. Our universe is what's called a Wesenheiten in the German. It's neutral positive. It's neither good nor evil. It has no gender, neither male nor female. It is evolving. It's improving. So it's not sitting up there in judgment of you. Your responsibility is your life, and your life is this life, and you have had lives in the past, and you have lives in the future. Your spiritual consciousness will not cease to exist. It moves from the spirit realm, which is kind of like an energy band around the planet, back to the material realm, which is where we're living now. And at 21 days, when the sperm fertilizes the ovum, the spirit form, the Geist form, comes out of the spirit realm, and it lodges into the middle brain area of the tiny 21-day-old embryo. And it brings a new personality, a conscious mind, a subconscious mind, and an unconscious mind. The subconscious mind has the wisdom, the consciousness forms of your previous personalities, all summed up and programmed into your subconscious. The conscious mind is a clean slate. It doesn't know how to walk. It doesn't know how to talk. It doesn't know how to do anything. And you're 21 days old, and you're starting another lifetime. And your spiritual consciousness may have had a typical Earth human, I think, according to the book, the psyche here is about 4.5 million years old. So you have the stored subconscious evolutive values of, for example, love and wisdom and discernment and knowledge and optimism and confidence and logic. And all these things have been stored through all these lifetimes. And that's what you get as your kind of step up as the material consciousness then lives another life. But it has to learn, again, how to control its emotions. It has to learn how to think again. Has to learn how to talk again. But it will be impulsed. These little signals come from the spirit form. And when you start to recognize these symbols, these little signals, that it will help your evolution. You'll start to develop an evolutive attitude. And you're starting to have introspection. And you're looking inward more and more. And you're not thinking in religious terms. So you're not needy. You're not a sheep. You're not submissive. You suddenly realize, hey, I'm responsible. And you start to learn, wow, my thoughts have incredible power. I do not have to fear. I do not have to worry. I do not have to have anxiety because my thoughts have incredible power. My thoughts, your thoughts. And we are a we form. All the people on the earth here are a we form. And I hope that the thoughts that this program has put out over the years, if you've not listened before, then, or if you have listened, you've had it go into the conscious mind. Hopefully it's into the subconscious mind now. Because as it moves into the subconscious mind, it will start to affect the bigger population of people. And they may not even be aware that they've been affected. So let me continue here with the way to live. On page 52, it says, but it is not good to do that either in regard to the fairness and to the respect of the next one, or for one's own well-being and for furthering one's own development, fulfilling of the duty to oneself, and one's fulfillment of one's own duty, which are defined thus. The fulfillment of one's own duty is that duty which the human being ought to observe and maintain in regard to the fulfillment of the duties which are worthy of the human being and which one is to impose upon oneself and fulfill through self-initiative. Said with simpler words, one's own duty means the task of the human being to fulfill his or her duty to himself through his or her own initiative, which present to the human being, among other things, as for example, respect, honor, honesty, good and correct actions, uprightness, openness, decent forms of language and expression, honor and dignity, peace, truthfulness, good and correct deeds, truthfulness and true humanity, esteem and high regard, and so forth and so on, both in regard to oneself as well as in regards to others. Thereby all life forms and the whole environment as well as the whole universal existence of all things generally are included. Thus nothing in the whole universe that would not be connected with the fulfilling of one's duty to oneself. So, and that was what I had read earlier with astonishment. So you need to think in. Let me also talk about the love of creation, which is the perfect example of thinking in neutral, positive ways. Now, one of the first creational natural laws is love, not romantic love. It's a love that is effective. It's based on reverence. It's based on respect. It's based on the notion to live and help live. Most of the world today, I don't even know if they're this far, but many people function on live and let live. And that means that you really let things die too. What you should be doing is live and help live. And that puts a certain responsibility on you to help plants and animals in the world in general. The world is in a terrible situation because of overpopulation. Our planet and planets like ours in the universe are designed to hold about 500 million people comfortably. The Pleiadians say we have about 8 billion at this point. So, as I've said on the Revolution radio program that, of course, I post here, I talk about how the notion of overpopulation is kind of misunderstood because people say, well, you can fit all 7 billion people into Texas because the world generally thinks we have about 7.5 billion people. Well, if you gave every person, if you're going to be fair and let everybody eat meat and only give them 500 pounds of beef for their whole life, which you think, oh, that's a lot of beef. A 1,200-pound steer produces 500 pounds of meat. If you live 100 years, it's only 5 pounds of beef a year. You can. If you live 50 years, it's 10 pounds of beef per year. 50 times 10 is 500. 500 pounds. 5 times 100, 5 pounds per year. 100-year lifespan. That's 500 pounds of beef. So if we have one cow per each person, and let's just say there are 7 billion people, So we have 7 billion cows, one for each person. And now we need 2 acres is ideal for that cow. So each cow gets 2 acres. We're going to assume ideal circumstances at first. That is 14 billion acres, which translates. So yeah, you may fit all the people in the world into Texas, but it's going to take 14 billion acres just to raise the cattle for them to eat. 14 billion acres is about 20 million square miles. It's all the space in South America, all the space in Mexico, United States, Alaska, Canada, and Russia, just to raise those cattle. And there are complications associated with that, because if you can't make grass-fed beef, then you've got to supplement with grain. Well, a cow can eat 24 pounds of grain per day. Now think about that. And a cow, depending on the circumstances, the weather, can eat or drink 3 to 30 gallons of water a day. Now think about that for a little bit. So just for the beef, if you're going to give just people a very small amount of beef to eat, could ultimately require 7 billion cows for the course of their whole lifetime. Now, I don't know if you have to keep 7 billion in the current population. Maybe, I don't know. It's hard to tell. That's where it gets even more complicated. So supporting these gigantic populations is very, very difficult. And I know this is kind of a side tangent to spiritual teaching, but because we don't know what these spiritual laws are, we do not understand the laws of the universe. The first is which love. And if you have a gigantic population, you're not really loving that population. You're not loving the earth either. You're doing what we're doing, which is cutting down the rainforest in Brazil to grow cows. They're turning the rainforest in Brazil into pastures for cows to graze. This is affecting the whole ecosystem of the planet. We're destroying the whole ecosystem. So we need to learn what love really is. Live and help live. So help the planet, help your animals around you, help your colleagues, help people. That's love. That's true love. Love is the highest principle in all creation, and through it, everything exists in absolute logic. That's from Love Letter 27 by Billy Meyer. One of the most profound passages I've ever came across in my life. Absolute logic. Love and absolute logic go together. Everything was created through love. Without the love of creation, nothing would exist. And love is logical, not illogical. If you have love, you're very stable, you're very logical. To operate with love makes you a logical individual. But if you are in love, you will be very illogical. In love is not effective love, it's romantic love. That's where you start to act like a nutcase. That's not true love. That's what the world programs and sees as love. What does it say? What says love and wisdom go together, and the creation and its laws are love and wisdom at the same time. So as you grow in love, you should also grow in wisdom, if you're really growing in love. And as you grow in wisdom, you should grow in love, if you're really growing in wisdom. Now, there's different kinds of learning in the world. There's technical learning. If you're doing something like computer programming, there's technical learning. That doesn't really produce love necessarily, but it is a part of your striving, which is the second creational law, the law of striving. Your striving deals with your work, deals with you cleaning out your garage, it deals with you brushing your teeth. Striving, your willingness to strive is what gives you happiness in life. As in the case with creation itself, every single vason of any kind, from the very first breath to its very last, also strives for that which is higher, for evolution and completion. Every moment in the existence of a vason is just as much directed at striving as the entire being of the creation itself. The creation itself, as well as all its creatures and Wesenheiten, is imbued with the power of the striving. In order to attain success, the future progress, and that which is the highest striving, is the power of the spiritual as well as of the physical. And striving is an incontrovertible creational law. In order to reach through incessant evolution that which is higher and absolutely fully developed. The greatest power in every single vason, which is you can think of as a vason, is like an animal with a consciousness, a human being. We're talking probably mostly about human beings here. The creation itself, as well as all its creatures in Wesenheiten, is imbued with the power of the striving. In order to attain success, the future progress, and that which is highest, striving is the second creational natural law. If you do not strive, if your striving is inhibited, you will be very hopeless. Your striving goes right along with your sense of life. Striving is the power of the spiritual as well as the physical. It involves both. And striving is an incontrovertible creational law in order to reach through incessant evolution for that which is higher and absolutely fully developed. The greatest power in every single vason is to serve the striving. Creational natural law number 2. And truthfully, the striving is this great and enormous power itself. Striving is the law of all evolution and of all absolutely full development. Striving is the power of the life in the sense of the progress. So if you have a sense of progress in your life, that comes from your striving. If you have a sense of depression right now, if you're going through a depressed phase, almost always involved in the solution is to focus harder on your striving. If the striving is absent in some life form, then the power of the progress extinguishes, and thereby the sense of the life. If a human being loses his or her striving, then he or she also loses the sense of life. If the human being can no longer strive for anything at all in himself or herself, he or she feels with deadly might that he or she is no longer a use for anything, and that as a human being he or she has become impossible, and that with Gewaltsamkeit his or her own existence is forfeited. Striving is the actual nature of the human being. However, if this nature is nullified, then the human being feels that he or she does not have a place in the world anymore. Rather, that he or she has to vanish from it. If the striving breaks down in the individual human being, then he or she becomes incapable of life, displeased with life, and suicidal. There are so many people that are suicidal today. It has to be part of the problem. The breakdown of the striving has to be part of the problem. I'm not saying it's the whole problem. It could be the entire solution, in fact, is to get striving again. But when the striving of the entire humanity, if the striving of the entire humanity to collapse, if no single individual would strive for that which is higher anymore, not for evolution, not for the best possible absolute full development, then the entire world would collapse into itself. and vanish without a trace, as if it had never existed. Were the creation to end its striving, then it would vanish without a trace, and there would be no being, which is indeed fundamentally based in the striving. Without striving, there is no life. Without life, there is no striving. Without life and striving, no evolution in being. Nothing would exist because everything would have vanished into the nothingness, without ever finding the possibility of the striving and thereby of the life. This is how incredibly important the striving is. To continue momentum in your life, continue striving, even if it's cleaning out your garage, cleaning your closet out or whatever. Something fundamental like getting exercise. And of course, striving is related to what your day job is. Striving is also related to helping others, to helping yourself, to helping your pets, to helping the plants in and around you, to helping the earth. All being is striving, and all striving is being. That which comes forth from the striving is truth, knowledge, wisdom, and love, as well as peace and harmony, progress and happiness. But also from the striving comes the consciousness and its incessant progress, right up to the being in highly, absolutely full development. Striving creates the life, right up to the being. Striving means delectation, which is like a satisfaction in a form which is always fulfilling and progressive. So, boy, it felt really good to do a whole hour pretty much on the spiritual teaching. I played one little clip where Michael Savage was talking to Alex Jones about potential civil war, and I went off on a tangent a little bit about overpopulation, but mostly about the spiritual teaching. You've been listening to Ohio Exopolitics. I'm your host, Mark Snyder. Have a great day today, and keep striving. We'll see you next time.